Hello everyone and welcome to OK Ramble, the only show on the internet where you can watch a Zoomer ramble for far too long about a topic that doesn't really matter. Intro still being worked on. Today we are going to be talking about Baldur's Gate 3, and specifically the wonderful companions that are all present. Yeah, that is how I would describe it. They are present in the game. But anyways, yeah, let's jump into it at number 12. Withers and the Hirelings. Frankly, I don't think this one really counts, but they are companions. They can be with you for the entirety of the game, so they're on the list. But they're also clearly the worst. Each of these hirelings, I believe there's about 12, one per class, so I want to say that is 12. They get one paragraph of backstory, and then that is all you get. They have, they're people that have died and have been brought back to life by Withers. Withers is actively controlling them, so they don't really have any distinct personality. It's cool that Withers can come along on your adventuring party, but Withers is also kind of lacking comparative to really everyone else in the game. I do find it amusing, his final scene where he's staring up at the wall at the Dead 3, and he's like, you guys are some dumb motherfuckers. But he really doesn't have too much going for him, I would say. There's some cool kind of subtext that his story, I think that's a lot of what makes his story work is the subtext, but there's not really a lot on the surface to analyze, and so I do think he is a weaker character compared to basically everyone else in the party. If you don't really do any digging, it kind of, you raid a tomb, this skeleton man joins your party, and then he's just kind of there for the rest of the game. Number 11. Halsin. He is not so much bad as he is just kind of average. He's a very generic character. He is the Druid of the Grove, right? He's the Archdruid, I believe is what the title is. And he is just the super generic druid type. He's, by nature's order, we must restore the animal spirits to the land. And he just, yeah, he doesn't have much going on. He's the Archdruid, as I mentioned, but he immediately quits at the end of Act 2. He is then central to Act 2, but he doesn't join the actual party until pretty late into it. You have to do a fair bit of side questing to get him there, right? And then you kind of have a choice, right? You can either have him restore the Shadowlands, and then he joins your party permanently, at which point he's kind of useless in Act 3, to the point where he actually got kidnapped in my playthrough, and it made zero difference to the story. Or you don't help him with the Shadowlands, and then he leaves your party, and it's kind of like, okay. I think further, there's not really a lot you can influence his story, right? Either you help him cure the Shadowlands, or you don't, and then that's basically the ending. There's really not much to him. I think his personality is also just kind of forgettable to me. I think the duck thing is kind of cute, but that's about it. People make a big deal out of the fact that he's like this uber horny man who's trying to sleep with everyone. But this is Baldur's Gate 3, like, everyone's trying to do that. I don't see that as a particularly unique trait here. Yeah, overall, I don't think there's really anything to write home about Halsin. Number 10. Minthara. Really, she just beats out Halsin by the fact that she has an interesting dynamic with the villains, right? So, in Act 1, Minthara is actually the antagonistic force if you are doing a good playthrough, right? She is in, not Moonrise Towers, she is in the Goblin Camp, and she's planning a raid on the Druid's Grove. Now, you can join her, actually, or raid the Druid's Grove, and then she joins you that way, or she can join you in Moonrise Tower if you spared her in the Goblin Camp, and then she'll join you out of wanting to get revenge for Catherick Thorn. And so it's kind of interesting how she relates, and then if you're doing an evil playthrough, to kind of follow up on that, you're doing an evil playthrough, she joins you, sees that you're like this real evil motherfucker, and she's like, "Oh, I'm gonna join you." At least that's my understanding. I haven't done an evil playthrough, so I might be slightly wrong. But either way, she joins you in betraying Ketheric Thorm and Gortash and Orin. And I think it's a very interesting dynamic, right? Obviously, she was working directly for Ketheric Thorm, so it is kind of interesting how she's like, "Oh, I have a lot of respect for this guy, but yeah, I can see where he's flawed." And then Gortash, she doesn't really have much about, but then Orange, she's like very deeply traumatized by. It's an interesting dynamic, but I think outside of that, there's really not much to her. She's very generically evil, very might makes right personality without the kind of complexity that Lizelle has. And again, much like Housen, there's not really a lot where you can impact her story, right? She can return to, I'm going to butcher this, Mesobarazan, or she can stay on Baldur's Gate, but it doesn't really make that big of a difference to my mind. She very much still remains the same character she was. She doesn't really have an arc compared to a lot of the other characters, and I don't think she's a strong enough personality to be undeserving of one. Number 9. Minsk. Minsk really just wins out here amongst House and Minthara for the mere fact that I find him entertaining. He's got a really fun gimmick in Boo. He's this weird berserker who's unabashedly just good, like a real moral paragon, but he's not smart in the way that he approaches this at all, but he is absolutely willing to dive headfirst into like anything he perceives as evil and fight it. Just a really fun character. Matthew Mercer actually voices him, which is really, really cool to see. He has some very interesting interactions with the people of Baldur's Gate, right? So he was the Stone Lord in Baldur's Gate, where he was controlled by the Mind Flayers, and then he is freed by you and your companions, and so he has some interesting interactions with Nine Fingers, who is the leader of the guild, who has been fighting up to that point, which is kind of interesting to see their dynamic. And then he goes over to the counting house, and it's an interesting discussion with the banker over there who he robbed. He doesn't really get much higher though, just because he joins so late. He joins in Act 3. Overall, I think Minsk is a entertaining character, but he doesn't really do much else. Again, he doesn't have much of an arc. There's not really a lot of quests associated with him, right? You kind of free him, and then he's just kind of there in your party. But he is very entertaining. I think the fact that he was in Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, which for the record, I have not played, but it helps that he is already an established character, that they were kind of able to bring a lot of that over here to Baldur's Gate 3 when he joined. Number 8. Jaheira. I mean, clearly, to my mind, the best non-origin character. One, she joins a lot earlier than Minsk, which helps her a lot. She joins in Act 2, but she's also a presence in Act 2 before she joins. And it really feels like she has her own thing going on compared to the other non-origin characters, right? She's got this long history of being a harper. She got her relationship with her husband who's passed. She's got her orphan kids that she's taking care of in Baldur's Gate. She's this really kind of reluctant hero who's like very cynical and world weary, but absolutely in some way just kind of compelled to do good, almost against her will, but she does it, right? And she's super interesting in that way, right? She's this kind of world-weary sage that has saved the world multiple times, and she kind of acts as the I want to say sage, but I've already used that in the sentence, so it would work poorly. She's the sage to your group, right? She's the wise old mentor who's done it before, and she's passing the torch to you guys as she's leaving. It's an interesting arc that she goes on, a very small one, but a very meaningful one, I think. Only thing dragging her down below the origin characters is the fact that, again, she's just kind of lacking in quests and arcs. It's a cool arc she goes on, but it's not a lot to explore to my mind. Her quest is also just free Minsk, and that's about the size of it. From here on out, I think you can basically put any of the origin characters in any order. They're all pretty great, and it's just kind of splitting hairs. I think you can put them in whatever order you want, and this list works perfectly fine no matter what order you put the origin characters in. So that being said, number 7, Karlach. So let me be clear, like I'm saying, all the origin characters rock. Karlach is a great character, a fantastic character. I adore so much about her, right? She is this very traumatized person who doesn't always have the best grip on her anger because of the trauma that was inflicted upon her, but she is overall a good, kind person who's very excitable, very almost childlike view of the world in terms of how she's kind of interacting and experiencing it, right? She's not lacking in intelligence, right? But she is also very much beyond overjoyed to see the world, right? Because she's not seen it for like 10 years. She's been in literal hell fighting a war. And so seeing the world for the first time in like a decade, right? She's overjoyed to see it. I think she's a great character, right? Before I say anything else, let me make that clear. That being said, I do think she is kind of lacking in story and in quests. So Act 1 and Act 2, she has very minor quests, right? In Act 1, she goes over to the Druid's camp to Daemon, gives him some infernal iron, and then he crafts her an upgrade for her engine, right? Which is burning hot, doesn't allow her to touch anything. It cools it down a little bit, right? And then the same thing happens in Act 2. She brings him some more, and he cools down the engine even more to the point where she can touch people, right? And that's where you can romance her if you're choosing the romance path. And that's all very cool to see. The ball kind of gets dropped in Act 3. She really takes a backseat to, I think, every other companion who at least gets something. She doesn't get a quest or anything here, which is very interesting. She has, again, a kind of interesting interaction with Gortash, right? But there's not a quest there, and you don't necessarily have to bring her to interact with Gortash. Gortash betrayed her when they were young, sold her to the devil, right? And now she's back, and she's obviously furious, and when you have her kill him, or you kill him, or one of your companions kill him, she has this whole monologue, which is very interesting about accepting death, right? Now, the problem that I have with that, right, is it's a very clear trajectory for her arc, right? She's accepted her death, and then the clear kind of arc that's going to go to is then she dies, but she's accepted it, and so it's fine, right? The problem I have, right, the kind of quote-unquote good ending here is she goes back to hell with Will, and they fight demons. And it's a cool ending, but it's odd. I think my bigger problem I have with it is that the choice for her ending, unlike basically every other origin character, is made in the last minute, right? So you can have 3 different endings for Karlach, right? You can have her become a Mind Flayer, which is chosen in the last hour or 2 of gameplay, and then she survives as a Mind Flayer, but she kind of loses her mind in a way. Or you can have her remain as herself, right? At which point she either 1, dies, or 2, continues to live on in hell. And I think the problem I have with that ending, the kind of quote-unquote good ending, is that after you get reunited with her, she drops the fact that, oh, hey, we found the infernal engine, the foragers of it, and we're going to have them construct an upgrade for me or remove it outright so I can return, right? And I think the problem with having that resolution is that we didn't really have a part in it, right? I think it's especially kind of rough when you look at Act 3 and you see that the party does go to Avernus, right? They could have added a forage or a crafter or something to the House of Hope. And so that you are not only going there for Lazelle's plotline and the Orpheus plotline, but also for Karlach's, right? I don't think that would have been too much, especially considering that the Raphael fight is such a difficult fight. I think the most difficult fight in the game. So having 2 companions' stories be resolved through the House of Hope, I think would have made a lot of sense. Number 6. Asterion. I was not initially impressed with Asterion, and I think that is why I have to place him so lowly on here. He really gets nothing crazy in Act 1 and Act 2, The one thing I really like is the multiple ways that he can reveal his vampirism to you, right? Which I believe is a binary, but I might be wrong. If he likes you well enough, he could just outright tell you, which is really cool. Or if you haven't gotten to that point yet and you long rest, there's a chance that you might wake up and see him trying to bite your neck. It's cool that there's multiple ways to find that out, but also think that there is, other than that, not really much there. He is a pretty constant source of comedy in the first two acts, which I do enjoy, and also in the third act, right? He has this very cynical, kind of done with attitude. He kind of doesn't want to be here, but he's kind of forced to be with these guys who are his really only source of, well, one, protection, right? Because if he leaves the party, he's going to die. Because he is not influenced by the artifact, and two, he is then going to not really be able to relate to anyone, as he is now a vampire, and two, a infected, that is a person infected with the Mind Flayer parasite, so he is kind of doubly ostracized in that regard. But I don't think he really has anything crazy, right? He gets a very minor quest in Act 1, which you can either kill the vampire hunter, or you can just kind of ignore him, or you can turn him, Astarion, into the vampire hunter. And that's really all there is for Act 1 and Act 2 for Astarion's content. The moment it kind of started to turn for me with Astarion is when you find out, I was playing a Dark Urge character, and everyone found out that he was a ball spawn, and I was going to companion, telling them, oh hey, so I'm a ball spawn. I just thought you should know. And Astarion, at first he's very much his Astarion self, and he's like, oh, haha, little ball babe, just don't stab me in the night, ha ha ha. And then you're like, oh, well, actually, I'm really worried about this, and I don't know if I can control myself, and that's very scary to me. And Astarion kind of drops the mask and is like, well, hey, I get that, we're very similar in that regard. I never asked to be a vampire. And it's terrible and it's tough, and even though we never asked for this, we can do our best and try to control ourselves. And I think even if you don't think you got this, I think you got this, and it's like this very beautiful moment, and it's like, oh shit. And I think that's when it started to come together for me for Astarion. His then further introduction to Cazador, who's been kind of hanging over Astarion the whole time, as a kind of shadow. That was all great. A very complicated moral choice there. If you can choose to have Astarion ascend to sacrifice all the people, right? Like 1,000 people, I believe, is what it says to be sacrificed to have Astarion become an ascended vampire, to have him become more powerful, right? Which could be useful in your fight against the Absolute. Or you can do the obviously more moral thing of not sacrificing everyone, right? But then you have the problem of what to do with those people, right? Because now you have 1,000 vampires. Are you just gonna let them run away, or are you gonna have to fight them, or what are you gonna do? It's just a very interesting moral question there. But I think the fact that I did not find him particularly interesting in the first two acts definitely brings him down. Number 5. Lae'zel. Yeah. I think she really loses points for the same reason Karlach loses points. Her ending is a little contrived and comes at the last moment. Now, I love the Vlaakith Orpheus decision, right? Does she choose to keep on believing a lie, or turn her back on everything she's known her entire life? It's a very poignant question, and it's very interesting. But I think it's handled very poorly, and I think a lot of, not the whole thing, but I think the ending to it is handled poorly. Specifically, if you choose Orpheus, right? If you choose Vlaakith, it becomes interesting to see how that all plays out. But if you choose Orpheus, and if you then steal the Orphic Hammer, or I guess even if you don't and you let Raphael make the deal for you, you get a decision at the end of the game. You get either choose the Emperor or choose Orpheus, right? If you choose the Emperor, he then kills Orpheus, and if you choose Orpheus, the Emperor joins the Netherbrain. And it feels very contrived to me, right? I don't think it makes a lot of sense for the Emperor, who has been strictly against the Netherbrain up to this point, to have him switch sides so fast. And I think that really brings down Lae'zel's story for me. The fact that it's such a binary. I think then it gets even worse, right, when you have Orpheus, who then is like, well, you're gonna have to become a Mind Flayer anyways, right? I think it makes the choice make even less sense, right? Because then you have the Emperor who's like, well, you're either gonna have to let me fight him as a Mind Flayer, or you're gonna have to become a Mind Flayer, and then Orpheus is like, yeah, we're gonna need a Mind Flayer. Well, it's like, well, what's the point in freeing you, right? Orpheus then kind of is like, okay, either you become a Mind Flayer, I become a Mind Flayer, and then it's like, well, do we have to do that, right? If you have Gale in your party, there is a chance that Gale can use his Netherstone orb, right, and blow up the Netherbrain. So it's kind of like, well, that's not our only option. Why do one of us have to become the Mind Flayer? It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, is what I'm trying to get at. There's more options here. And I think that, more than anything, brings down Lae'zel for me, right? Where you can kind of have to sacrifice someone. It's like, well, why though, right? That being said, I do really love her arc if you choose Orpheus, right? She really starts to grow as a person. Her arc is that of going from a person who is very militaristic in their mindset, right? Very much might makes right, very similar to Minthara, but then kind of growing from that point, where if you have her join Orpheus, she kind of starts thinking about liberty and freedom and choosing for yourself what is right? And if you have her then adopt the egg, right? By the way, side note, I hate how Orpheus frames it, if you steal the egg, because those people that you would have stolen the egg from would have just let that child grow into another follower for Blacketh, and then if you adopt the child, don't give it away to the Society of Brilliance and let Lae'zel keep it and raise it, it's kind of like, well, why are you mad here for, man? Like, what's your problem? But if you let Lae'zel do all that, right, you're like, oh, well, whatever happened to that egg that you had? And she's like, oh yeah, you know, I've hatched it and it's named Zan, and I don't really know what's gonna happen. I think that he's gonna be a great warrior, or who knows, maybe a poet or a explorer or whatever. It doesn't matter. I think he's gonna be great at what he does, but it should be his choice to make. And it's like, oh yeah, that's exactly what the story is about. I also think she is pretty great at contributing to the plot. I don't think Karlach or Asterion are particularly great at contributing to the main plot of the story, right? But Lae'zel is the first companion you meet, frees you to the Mind Flayer ship, and then also is a key point in the story in the third act, even if I don't necessarily love the direction that it goes. Number 4. Will gets a lot of flack for being quote-unquote boring, and I don't think that's very fair, right? Now, he is a very goody-two-shoes kind of character, but he's not boring. The reason he really works for me is he's gone through some shit, right? Look at his entire life, right? He was the kind of prince of Baldur's Gate. I don't think that's the correct term that would be in that scenario, but he's this kind of prince that's set to inherit the Grand Duke title. He then has to sacrifice his eye to protect the city that he loves. He then gets banished for what he's done. He is afterwards in a demonic contract with the devil, who is then kind of coerced into doing evil acts that he believes are good, but he doesn't truly understand to the extent that they are kind of malicious, right? For the fact that he does a good act, right, saving Karlach, he's permanently disfigured even after you break the contract. He is kidnapped by Mind Flayers. He then gets a parasite lodged into his brain, and despite all that, he is good, right? I think it definitely has some spice to it that I think a lot of other goody-two-shoes characters really don't. I think the fact that he chooses to do good despite everything, right, is kind of key to his character and kind of why I think he's really great. He doesn't get a option to do evil because he isn't really that character. I think if you play as him, you get that option, but if you are not him, he doesn't do that because he's not that character. I also like the amount of quests that are present, right? He also has a pretty solid contribution to the story overall, right? In Act 1, he is over in the group, he's helping protect them, right? He gets a really solid introduction, especially compared to a lot of the rest of the cast who have pretty weak introductions in the first act. He is defending the grove, at which point then you go over to Joaquin's Rest, at which point you find out that his father's been kidnapped and he's been taken to Moonrise Towers, right? You go into Act 2, you track down his father, he gets away, even though you did your best to track him down. In Act 3, you then have to go out and save him, right? You have this crazy choice where you have to be like, oh, do we let him die, or do you save him, but damn well to hell, right? Even further than that, after you save him, or after you damn him, you get a choice to go after, like, this legendary dragon under Baldur's Gate. You get multiple quests. You get 2 quests for Will in the third act, which is pretty unprecedented. Karlach doesn't even get 1, and I think every other character gets only 1. So for Will, he has a lot of content on display here. My only drawback I have for Will is that his questline is a bit buggy. For instance, I chose the path where Will breaks his contract with Mizora, but we still were able to save his dad. It is a tricky thing to do, but it is possible, right? When you're in the Iron Throne, Mizora summons like a handful of spiders, and they blow up on contact with Will's dad. But if you heal him and then teleport him, you can kind of get him out just before he dies, right? And so you can break the contract but still save Will's dad. But the game doesn't really account for this properly in a couple of ways. So one, if you talk to Mizora after the fact, she will say something along the lines of, oh, well, you saved him this time, but just you wait, I'll get him yet, something along those lines. But then that never really happens, right? The shoe never really drops on that one. So if you have Will at the reunion feast 6 months later, he'll just be like, yeah, my dad's perfectly fine, we talk all the time. And it's like, well, what was that all about, right? And I think the other part of that was when I talked to Will's dad immediately after rescuing him, they mind-linked, and Will kind of got to show his dad why he chose the actions that he did and what happened. And Will's dad is like, oh, wow, I can't believe you chose to save me and damn yourself. And it's like, well, that's not what happened. We didn't do that. And so, like, the game clearly wasn't prepared for that. But it is what it is. I still think that Will has a very solid arc. I will say one thing I really do like about him is the kind of ambiguity of his ending. Most characters have a good ending or a bad ending, but Will's ending is a little bit more complicated because you can go 2 paths, well, 3 paths, right? You can have him stay basically as he was. He can be the Blade of the Frontiers. This is provided, I believe, if he is never cursed by Mizora. He can continue to be the Blade of the Frontiers, or if you don't really go down his questline too much. But if you proceed on his questline, he can either 1, become the Grand Duke, or 2, become the Blade of Avernus. And it's an interesting choice because do you think it is better for Will, who is this clearly moral person, to either keep going on his adventuring ways and fighting monsters and preventing people from making the same mistakes that he did, signing his soul off to a devil, or would it be better for this clearly good and moral person to be in a place of power and politics where he can really do a lot of good for a lot of people? It's hard to say, right? And I think that moral ambiguity is really nice, when in a lot of places it's a lot less morally gray. Number 3. Shadowheart. If I am not mistaken, and I might be, but I believe Shadowheart has the most content out of all the companions. She is one of the 2 companions, Lizelle being the other one, that you can meet on the Nautiloid. She has the artifact in her possession, right, which is the whole reason that you and your companions are able to stay alive with the parasite. It also has the Emperor in it, the Orpheus. Yeah, the Orpheus. Very major impact on the plot, right? Without her having the artifact, the plot does not happen. Now, I don't think it makes a lot of sense why she in particular would have it, right? Like, it kind of seems like the only reason the Sharans wanted the artifact is because everyone else wanted it, and they're like, oh, we want to be part of the club too. And it's like, that doesn't seem like the best motivation, but whatever, moving forward. She's got a fantastic arc and a lot of stuff going on in every act, right? In Act 1, she is your first companion. She's also the bearer of the artifact, as mentioned. She has a lot of small interactions in every act that the other companions don't get of, at least not to the point that Shadowheart gets, right? She has these moments where she'll walk by something and she'll be like, oh, this reminds me of this, even though I don't remember what my past is because she's got amnesia. Or she'll see a wolf and she's like, oh, I'm terrified of wolves. She's also the only character with a flashback sequence. No other character, I believe, gets a flashback sequence. She has an amazing arc with 2 great culminations, right? In Act 2, you have this culmination of her beliefs in Shar being questioned, where she confronts the Night Song, and she can either kill the Night Song and commit fully to Shar, or reject Shar and start her path into believing Selûne, right? Just like her parents beforehand. And if you save the Night Song, she'll learn about the fact that her parents were Selûnites and they're being held captive in Baldur's Gate. So you have this great resolution in Act 2, right, with the Night Song. And then in Act 3, you have even more choices, right, where you enter Shar's domain. I can't remember what it was called, the House of Grief, if I'm not mistaken, where you enter there and you have even more choices, where you can give up Shadowheart to have the Sharans fight alongside you, or you can have Shadowheart become the Mother Superior if she's still a Sharan, or you can have her go and kill all the followers of Shar in Baldur's Gate, go back and free her parents, right? But then when you go back to free her parents, you have an even bigger decision to make. Do you free Shadowheart from Shar's curse, or do you free her parents, right? You don't get a lot of different varied endings, right? You can have Shadowheart become an adventurer, or you can have her become the Mother Superior of the Sharans in Baldur's Gate. You can have her settle down in some farm with her parents and have a whole bunch of different animals. It's very interesting, all the different paths that Shadowheart can take, and how you can achieve them all. She has something contribute to basically every single act, and she is a very well done and fleshed out character. Number 2. Gale. Gale is a really fascinating character. He is, on the one hand, kind, brave, charming, a very merry kind of guy who doesn't seem like he has a lot of worries, or at least that's the way he likes to present himself. But underneath all that, he is ambitious, and he is ambitious to a fault. I love a character with a very clear and distinct tragic fatal flaw, and Gale has that. He is ambitious, and that has gotten him to where he is right now, and he is in a lot of trouble because he was the chosen of Mystra, but he wanted too much, and he has now cursed himself to this life of absorbing magical artifacts or risking himself becoming an atom bomb, basically. He contributes pretty majorly to the story if you want him to. Now, there's not a lot for him to do in Act 1, right? He's just kind of absorbing artifacts, and then he's like, oh, well, here's my secret you ought to know. And then you go on to Act 2, and you're like, oh, well, Gale can just sacrifice himself, and we can just end this whole thing right now, which is an option. I believe you just get a game over if you do so at this point. But you would save the world, technically. Going even further, right, into Act 3, Gale can solo the whole Netherbrain, right? He can win the whole fight by himself just by sacrificing himself. And he wins. In my notes, I also just wrote, fucked a goddess, which he sure did. He did do that. He has 5 endings, which are all pretty distinct. With the 5 distinct endings, you have one ending where Gale just sacrifices himself, right? And then he kind of becomes a projection in the netherworld. He has this, wizards seem to have this way of putting a little piece of them into some kind of simulacrum of themselves, and they are able to communicate in the afterlife even though they're dead. It's a part of their personality but not their whole. That's kind of strange how it works, but fair enough. He can also then become a professor which I think is the best ending for him, right? He has let go of his ambition, he's been cured of the Nether Orb, and he is living his best life. Otherwise, he can just become a god and either come back with Mystra, right, reunite with her, or start fighting her and completely annihilate her. He can also become an Illithid, at which point he can become cured by Mystra and go with her to Elysium, or he can fail to become a god. Yeah, I think the fact that he is so multifaceted, I think he is really the most human character, which I guess makes a lot of sense considering that he is one of the only human characters. But the fact that he is so multifaceted, he has so much going on, he can really impact the story in a lot of major ways, in a way that many other companions can, I think is genuinely great. But there is one that can do better, and that is Scratch. I mean, come on, who else was it going to be at number one?